In 2010, a production company pitched an idea that broke every single rule of reality television. 10 strangers in a drafty tent, staring anxiously at an oven in the middle of a rain-soaked British field. The most dramatic moment of the season would be a retired builder worrying that his sourdough hadn't risen enough. By all logic, the Great British Bake Off should have been a disaster. It should have been cancelled after one season and condemned to daytime TV reruns next to Bargain Hunt and Homes Under the Hammer. But the British public turned this polite experiment into a ratings juggernaut that even humiliated the World Cup. It caused supermarkets to literally run out of flour and convinced 15 million people to spend their Wednesday nights sweating over soggy bottoms and even bakes. To really grasp why Bake Off exploded, you have to remember what television looked like in the late 2000s. Cooking shows were essentially war zones. You had Hell's Kitchen, Kitchen Nightmares, and MasterChef. The formula for success was humiliation is entertainment. Gordon Ramsay made his fortune screaming at terrified chefs. Judges threw plates of food in the bin. The editing was fast, stressful, and designed to spike your heart rate. By 2010, the real world was already stressful enough. Banks were collapsing, austerity measures were biting, and the news was a relentless feed of doom and gloom. People didn't want to come home after a long day and watch a chef scream at a crying intern. They wanted a hug. Bake Off provided that. It replaced the shiny industrial stainless steel kitchens of MasterChef with a tent draped in bunting, set in a green garden with birds chirping in the background. But the real secret sauce was the casting strategy. The producers intentionally banished the villain archetype from the tent. In almost every other reality show, producers hunt for conflict. They want the person who will steal someone else's ingredients or start a fight in the dorms. Bake Off did the opposite. They cast people who instinctively helped each other. If someone's mousse didn't set, their competitor would rush over to help them fix it. This created a new genre of television that critics eventually dubbed nice core. For a British public tired of cynicism, this show was a shelter. If you need proof the politeness of this show had the British public smitten, you only need to look at the scandal of 2014. It's known simply as Bingate. The victim was a bearded construction engineer named Ian. During a heatwave in the tent, a fellow contestant named Diana removed Ian's ice cream from the freezer to make room for her own. She left it on the counter, and in the sweltering heat, it turned into a puddle of vanilla soup. When Ian discovered the crime, he snapped. He physically threw the entire dessert in the bin and walked out of the tent. It was the first time the nice core veneer had cracked. The reaction from the public was genuinely immense. The BBC received over 800 official complaints. Police were tagged in tweets. The hashtag Justice for Ian trended globally. Diana, a lovely woman in her 60s, was branded a saboteur and a villain by the tabloids. The nation was so deeply emotionally invested that a melted dessert could feature in the national newspapers for a week, proving that Bake Off was no ordinary show. And when you have a show that can generate that kind of press, the people in suits start paying attention. By 2016, Bake Off was pulling in over 10 million viewers for the BBC, numbers that were practically unheard of in the fragmented modern era. The show was produced by a company called Love Productions, but it aired on the BBC. This was a marriage of convenience that was about to turn sour. The BBC is public service television funded by a license fee. It has no ads, no product placement, and a mandate to serve the public good. It was the perfect, safe home for a show about purity and kindness. But Love Productions knew exactly what they were sitting on. They wanted market value for their golden goose. Negotiations began to break down over the price tag. The BBC offered around £15 million a year to keep the show, a massive sum for a public broadcaster. Love Productions wanted £25 million, which the BBC simply couldn't match without cutting funding to other vital services. This opened the door for the unthinkable. Channel 4 swooped in with a check for £75 million to literally steal the show. The reaction was nuclear. The British press treated this acquisition like a death in the family. They called it greed and a betrayal of the British public. The narrative was that the pure show had been sold to the dirty commercial channel. The beloved hosts, Mel and Sue, quit immediately. They famously released a statement saying they were not going with the dough, a pun that hit a very real principled stand against the commercialization of the show. Mary Berry, the queen of the tent and the nation's grandmother, stayed with the BBC out of loyalty. Only Paul Hollywood took the paycheck and moved to Channel 4. Everyone predicted the show would die. The prevailing wisdom was that ads would ruin the vibe, that without Mary Berry, the soul was gone, and that Paul Hollywood would be rejected as a traitor. Channel 4 had just spent £75 million on a tent without the people who made it special. They had a massive financial hole to fill, and they needed to start making that money back immediately. They knew they were walking on thin ice with the viewers. If they slapped a logo on the mixing bowls or had the bakers talking about how great a specific brand of butter was, the audience would revolt. They had to protect the purity at all costs. Channel 4 promised that the set would remain product placement free. Instead, they sold the brakes. They secured massive sponsorship deals with brands that fit the wholesome vibe perfectly. Lyle's Golden Syrup and Dr. Oetker signed on as the premier sponsors in a deal worth around £4 million. Later, Amazon swooped in with a massive deal estimated at £5 million to £8 million a year to associate their Echo products with the baking phenomenon. But even here, they had to be careful. There was a massive controversy when the show started using Smeg fridges. The purity police stepped in. Channel 4 had to navigate this minefield carefully, ensuring that while they were raking in millions in ad revenue, the viewer felt like they were still watching a village fete. There is, however, one final fascinating quirk to this billion-dollar empire. We've talked about the £75 million deal, the sponsorship checks, and the massive ad revenue. It's undeniably a commercial juggernaut. But for the bakers themselves, the financial reality is very different. In American reality shows, there's always a massive financial carrot dangling in front of the contestants. If you win MasterChef, you get $250,000. If you win Survivor, you get $1 million. But if you win the Great British Bake Off, you get flowers and a glass cake stand. That's it. There's no appearance fee and no prize money. While the show does provide a stipend to cover the cost of ingredients for practice, most contestants are simply normal people taking time off work to stress cry over fondant with no guarantee of a financial return. In a world where everyone has a price, Bake Off convinced us that the highest form of competition is doing it for the love of the game. If there were £100,000 on the line, people would be sabotaging each other's ovens. They wouldn't be helping each other with their mousse. By removing the financial incentive for the players, the show managed to preserve its innocence. Channel 4's gamble eventually paid off. They brought in new hosts, Sandy Toksvig and Noel Fielding. It was a bizarre choice. Noel Fielding was a surrealist comedian known for the mighty boosh, a man who had absolutely no connection to the world of baking, but it worked. Fielding brought a weird energy that stopped the show from becoming stale and twee. The ratings held up. Channel 4 managed to draw in massive audiences, with the finale of their first season drawing in millions of viewers, validating their £75 million investment. They proved that the format was stronger than the channel it aired on. They renewed the deal, cementing Bake Off as a permanent fixture of commercial television. Today, Bake Off stands as a global phenomenon. It's been licensed to over 100 territories. The format has been replicated in countries from Brazil to Japan, but the original British version remains the gold standard. It has survived the departure of its original hosts, the move to a commercial channel, and the changing tastes of the television audience. It survived because it refused to change its DNA. As we look at the landscape of modern media, where algorithms push us toward conflict and outrage because it drives engagement, Bake Off stands as a defiant counter-argument. It proves that engagement can also come from empathy. That millions of people will tune in not to see someone fail, but to see them succeed. It's a billion-dollar industry built on the simple, radical idea that people are basically good, and that cake makes everything slightly better. But what do you reckon? Do you miss the old days of Mel and Sue, or have you embraced the chaos of Noel? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. Let's get a proper debate going. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell so you don't miss out on the next video. Cheers for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.